is this the turning point for the Sacramento Kings? We're talking about you've got a situation. We don't know how it's going to develop over the course of the next few weeks, few months with Mike Brown. You got a team that went from 48 wins to 46 wins, who in year one, the 48-win season, people will tell you they left some games on the table at the end of the season because they were shutting down. They were solidified. They weren't fighting for a spot anywhere like they were this year. Like they were the 3 seed and nothing was going to change.
You can make an argument that's a true, like that's a 50-win team.
You could. You could. De'Aaron and a number of other Kings will tell you they left games on the table this year. And De'Aaron went as far as say, if we did what we were supposed to do from the free throw line, we're a 50-win team. They didn't. In either situation, they weren't a 50-win team year one. They weren't a 50-win team year two. But we, and I'm sure they, believe that year one, if they had run through the tape, they could have. De'Aaron was the one who said, yeah, we could have and should have been better than we were. Well, you're not to label anyone as excuse making. You're out of excuses here. You're like the slack on the rope. It's tightened up a little bit. Like you can't. That's not a conversation piece. What you should have done or what you could have done isn't a conversation piece anymore. It can't be a conversation piece anymore, I should say. This to me feels like a year where, okay, if you think you were this in year one, we'll use the term 50-win team. You were a 50-win team in year one, but you didn't for this reason. You believe you could have been a 50-win team in year two, but you weren't for this reason. Okay. You need to be a 50-win team this season.
100%. 100%. This year, this upcoming year is akin to the offseason going into the year they made the playoffs. Remember, it felt like, I think the phrasing was the end of the last year they didn't make the playoffs. I was on here and I was like, it can't turn to 17. Yeah. Like it just can't.
Yeah.
If it turns to 17, everything is on the table with people that I like, with people that I want to be here for a long time, but everything's on the table. It didn't. They got to the playoffs. They had a sense of urgency. They made some right moves, and they stopped that drought. It almost feels like this upcoming season is the same thing to a certain degree. You miss the playoffs next year. I don't want to say everything's on the table.
No, you could say it. Because so Jesse just put that note to the side, and I read it and thought about it. Like, what does that mean? The turning point. Like, what does this mean? And I started to think through, and I think context is important, and understandably, people hate that. Context to why they didn't win 50 wins the first time. Context to why they didn't do it the second time. That's fine. Context is important. If they're approaching a top 6 spot at 50 wins, and Domas gets hurt the final week of the season, De'Aaron gets hurt the final week of the season, or the final 10 games of the season. Yeah, like context to how things went wrong. That's important. But I did think, do you start to think about life without one of those two guys? Do you start to wonder if that combination doesn't work together? And I don't know the answer to that, because I don't think you can have a conversation. Well, if the Kings miss the playoffs, everything is on the table. That's a fair sentiment on May 21st. Happy birthday to the notorious B.I.G., Christopher Wallace. But it also is, well, they missed the playoffs, and here's the story of the season. Every season has a story. And that's important to this too. Jesse,
do expectations change if Malik Monk isn't a Sacramento King this season? Do we kind of, all right, give him a year to work or whatever? We kind of took a step back.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Nah, what sucks is if Malik's not back, Man, that sucks. All right, Monty, fix it.
Hmm.
And that's the true, like, that's another, damaging component to what happened this season. That's another damaging component to losing in the play-in and missing the playoffs. Is you have a situation now that could alter your roster a little bit. It could alter your vibes a little bit, and Monty doesn't get leeway for it.
Right.
Like, okay, hey, it sucks. There was only so much that you could do. Okay, you got to fix it. Like immediately, like right now, you have to fix it. It sucks. We're going to miss Malik. We want him here. But sorry, Monty, you don't get a cushion here. You've got to fix this. And so, no, I don't think nothing changes.
I agree. And it's unfair. It is unfair. It's on fire.
No.
All right. But that's where they're at right now. And that's the urgency of everything that's going on, man. Like you've got major contracts on the horizon, contract extensions, all this other stuff on the horizon, and you've got to have a direction. The reason why I hesitate a little bit saying everything's on the table, because I don't see a scenario where if they don't make the playoffs, they trade Fox and Sabonis. Remember,
I don't think so.
Or Fox or Sabonis. Remember, before they made the playoffs, I would say, like when people are like, "Yo, it's this person's fault" or this whatever, I'm like, if you want to say De'Aaron Fox is the problem or they need to look at moving him, I'm not here to argue with you. But what I would say is there are about 4 or 5 things that you can do to this team and this roster and this franchise before you get to trade De'Aaron Fox. That was the absolute last thing. Like, we have no more hope because we've tried everything else and now we've got to move on. I feel like, and I won't say one is higher than the other, but I'll just say trading either Fox or Sabonis, if you don't make the playoffs this year, is the last thing on that list. There are other things that you can do to try and fix that roster, other pieces that you can trade, other pieces that you may be looking to move before you get to, all right, man, we just gotta we gotta move either Fox or Sabonis to reset this whole thing. That's what gives me the pause on saying everything's on the table, because I don't think moving on from one of those two would be on the table if you didn't make the playoffs, but everything else would be.
Well, yeah, we know it doesn't start with the players, but like, what is it looking like for Mike Brown if they miss out? I know how we feel about that and all that, but like, honestly, if they miss out, like, he doesn't have a contract extension right now, so like, they miss out or whatever. Like,
well, Jesse, we talked about it, and Damien didn't agree. I understand why, but they don't make the playoffs. Monty and Mike are on the hot seat.
So I would. Okay, fine. I don't agree, but if we're gonna play this game, Monty's seat would be hotter. So if you have a fancy car like KC's, and you like you have
yours is more fancy. The interior is like literally custom made.
Let the guy cook. Let him cook.
You have the seat warmers. Like Mike is like level 1 of the seat warmer, but Monty's like level 3.
No, I got you. I agree with that as well. Like, Mike is a good coach, and like they missed the playoffs and all that.
I think Mike's a great coach.
Yeah, Mike, great coach. Yeah. Like he's one of the better coaches in the league. It's the more so like he's got to work with something, and I don't think he has everything. Like, they haven't maximized it yet. We're still searching for Mike Brown guys and all that.
Yeah, they need just a little bit more talent on this roster, and that's Monty's job.
Because I think if you do get the talent, like you do get in a Brandon Ingram type or even a Kyle Kuzma, like I'm not like, oh, we'll see if they can make the playoffs. Like, oh no, it's go time now. I think that's kind of just what we're missing at that point. Not even specifically like Ingram or Kuzma, but just we need to round out the roster finally.
I mean, because look, as they are, I think we've talked about it before. They're ceiling what they could be. I think they could be a team that is like 5th in the West, as they are. You know what I mean? If you want to raise your floor and your ceiling, that's where you got to get more talent. You know what I mean? You like if you get an Ingram or something like that, it feels like your floor at that point turns into top 6. You know what I mean? And you could get up to the 2nd or 3rd seed at that point. You want to maybe that's what this offseason is about. maybe I could be wrong. You want to raise your floor. Maybe it's not as important to raise your ceiling as it is to raise your floor.
See,
Because I think you got to make the playoffs. I don't think anybody's saying you got to be a 2 seed. Everybody's saying you just got to make the playoffs and you got to do as much as you can to almost guarantee that.
isn't your floor already that you're like just a 46, 48 win team? Because like it wasn't great this season. Like we watched them all year. It's like these guys cannot get into the flow of anything. But like they missed playoffs, but they still finished around 46 wins or whatever. We're game out. Like don't we kind of know their floor? More so
Well,
just
no,
because
he's
like
saying it needs to be higher.
Oh, I
Their-
got you.
Their,
Yeah,
their
yeah.
floor
The
needs to be.
floor now is like the 10 seed. I don't
got
think
you.
they go below that, but you got to make your floor the 6 seed.
Yeah.
I got it.
Jesse said something of a phrase. He used a phrase I don't think we've used before. Is Mike Brown guys. Like, what's it? We're searching for a Mike Brown guy. And I don't know who.
Pizza guy.
Well,
Keon Ellis is a Mike Brown guy.
That's what it feels like, right?
Yeah.
Kevin Huerter is not. That's what it feels like.
Mhm.
So I went back to look at the 2009-2010 Cleveland Cavaliers team to try to figure out what exactly is a Mike Brown guy. Obviously, you have LeBron James there averaging 29.7 points per game.
My goodness.
But it's you have Mo Williams there, who was a fine scorer. You know, the league was different. He was second on the team with 15.8. Cleveland was not an offensive juggernaut either. That was one of, interestingly enough, the knocks on Mike Brown is he wasn't doing enough for LeBron James offensively, and he wasn't surrounding LeBron James with enough offensively.
Let's do this as you run down that roster.
Mm-hmm.
Mo Williams is closer to Kevin Huerter. I'll tell you who's closer to Kevin Huerter or Keon Ellis.
Antoine Jameson,
Kevin Huerter,
Anderson Varejao,
Keon Ellis,
Anthony Parker. Yes, that's Candace's brother.
Did he play much?
Yeah.
He played 20 minutes a game, 28.
He's probably closer to Keon. He's in the middle, but he's closer to Keon.
Delonte.
Keon, I'd say Keon.
Well, Shaquille O'Neal was on this team.
Well,
Keon Ellis guy right there.
So let's do two more.
Mhm.
JJ Hickson
Huerter.
and Sadrunas Ilgauskas.
I would like to say Huerter, but I think he was like a good rim defender. So
I think the Ilgauskas take is wrong.
you think he's more Keon?
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
think the Hickson take. You said
That's it, Kevin Huerter. He's more of an offensive player. We could
really.
I could have made this even more simpler and be like offense player, defense.
Yeah,
player.
no, I know. But it
was a mix.
Feels
though.
like
It sounds like there was more of a mix than maybe people remember or anything. Or
well, but I think what people remember is there was no. If LeBron is De'Aaron, there was no Domas. There wasn't even a Keegan. There were Hurters and Barneses. With all due respect,
they probably look at Big Z as the Sabonis. What was his numbers?
Sure.
What was his numbers? They
Well, this year was a bit of a. He was 34 this final year. They did. I always point to this year. Mike won 61 games this year. But Ilgauskas this year played 64 games average.
Eligible.
Well, he only started 6. But like I said,
He only started 6?
He started 6. Remember, Shaquille O'Neal was on this team. I know, but he was. Z this final year, 7 points per game, 5 rebounds, less than an assist.
Yeah, that was the end of Z.
Yeah, I think this was Z's last year. He might have stuck around for one Byron Scott year. He didn't. He was in Miami. Oh, he was with LeBron.
He went with LeBron.
He was like, "Yeah, I'm going with LeBron. I'm out of here."
Do not remember that at all.
Yeah, he went. Man, he played 72 games in Miami.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Sadrunas Ilgauskas played 72 games with Miami Heat.
Absolutely.
That's crazy.
Absolutely, he did.
I thought that was more Joel Anthony.
71 games with the Miami Heat that first year of the Heatles.
Mm.
But Z was a very good player for Cleveland. But he wasn't the passer Domas was.
No.
He was more of a big.
Yeah.
But again, most of the bigs in the league were that. That's what they were.
What do you guys think of Mike Brown players like now? Is it just more so a guy who can knock down a shot, but play defense also? Because like I kind of think that's Keon Ellis. I feel like Mike can trust Keon out there. Like if the ball comes to him, he can knock down a three, but also like you can count on his defense no matter what.
Is it crazy to say Davion might have finally turned into a Mike Brown player?
That's a good one right there.
And it felt like, I think there were a lot of things going on with Davion. I'll have to ask someone more skilled in film watching, like what like the dramatic shift was between when he was playing and when he wasn't. We can look at the offensive stuff, and we talked about what he did regularly on the offensive end with extreme confidence. His confidence level changed in the middle of the season for reasons known to no one but the people in that Golden One Center practice facility. He just got confident every time he took a shot. That certainly wasn't there to start the season, but it's hard for me to believe. And to Davion's credit, he did dumb it down to that. Talking to Chris Haynes at Charlene's Beauty Supply in Elk Grove. I've got to get consistent with my shot. Like Mike couldn't leave me out there because I couldn't do what he needed to do on the offensive end. Yeah. But he looked like, Keon kind of took the spotlight because he came out of nowhere. Davion was doing what Keon was doing.
Well, when Malik went out,
second half of the season,
I don't want to say like Davion completely matched his production or whatever, but the bench didn't completely fall off because guys like Davion were stepping up too when Malik was done.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that I think about when we talk about like who's a Mike Brown guy and all this other stuff is how many does Mike think he needs? Right? Like he would want 10 Mike Brown guys, right? But I think there's got to be a little give there.
Well, that might get you 61 wins and a loss to the Celtics.
Well, game 5. No, that was a bizarre outing from LeBron James. But like if you
stay away from those rumors forever.
Yeah. Which I don't believe, by the way.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Google it if you haven't read it.
But the like I think there's got to be some balance, right? Like there's got to be some balance. You need, I know people get on me about, the offense and all this. You need some scoring, man. You need some guys that are straight bucket getters. And if they're able to get buckets and compete on the defensive end, that's cool too. You don't want anybody that's just a turnstile. But you got to look at like, you gotta have some offense.
Well, I feel like it's not just necessarily you can only be a defensive guy because I think right now the Kings roster probably has seven guys Mike Brown would consider like his guys, like a Mike Brown type guy.
Who you thinking?
Starting off the bench, I'm gonna go Trey, Davion, and Keon, and then it's Sabonis, Fox, Keegan, and I know how we feel, but it's Harrison as well.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree.
Yeah, so he's in there. So there's about 7 guys right there. Like Trey Lyles isn't necessarily like a defensive stopper or anything like that, but more so he's not.
I think some of the younger players might be guys Mike really likes too. They're just not
there yet.
Yeah.
So I mean, the way I look at that, you got room to go get you a bucket getter.
I think he wanted Duarte to be a Mike Brown guy.
Oh, he tried his best. He tried his best.
He tried.
Like Chris
but
Duarte,
you got, and I agree with what you're saying, Jesse. And that means you got room to go get you somebody. Go get you. I'm just throwing out the name. We don't have to have a long conversation about, but you got room. If you got all those guys around him that are tough-minded, and this is assuming that he's not, but tough-minded and we'll lock up, we'll defend and all this other stuff. You can go get you a Zach LaVine if you don't think he's that. Because if you look at the starting lineup, you got 4 other dogs around him. You could essentially hide him and let him be on, one of the worst offensive players on the other end and let him focus on scoring as long as he makes his rotations and stuff like that. Yeah, why not? I don't think if you, and I agree with Jesse. I think that's an accurate assessment. If you got that many guys that you're confident in on the defensive end on that roster, they'll help make up for whatever deficiencies that guy has, or that guy will step up with those other guys around him. They'll be like, well, I don't want to look like the weak link out here.
Mhm.
So I need to make sure, I'm giving the same type of effort, giving my best effort on the defensive end or making my rotations and all this other stuff.
I don't mean to pick on Kevin Huerter either, but it's a lot different when the guy who's not playing different defenses is scoring 23 a game compared to 12, 13.
If Kevin Huerter put up that same 15 he did last year, I don't think there'd be an issue. But his scoring dipped, and now everything maybe was looking funny in the light to Mike.